Yeah, so the trolling of JK Rowling is just absolutely horrific. As you describe it, she gets rape threats, death threats. People say the most obscene things to her. It is absolutely smothered in misogyny. The word witch hunt is overused these days. I overuse it myself, probably, but this really does feel like a witch hunt. This is a bad woman, a supposedly sinful woman being hounded all the time by mobs of people, and very often mobs of men. So it's really repulsive, and it traces back to the fact that she came out, which is a scary thing to do these days, to come out as someone who believes that biological sex is real, that there is a difference between men and women, and that men should not have access to women-only spaces. These are now heretical views. You're not allowed to express them in public, and if you do, this will happen to you. You will be hounded from pillar to post. So it's a really shocking situation.
And it does seem that when women speak out on this issue, they do get more attacks. I get very little about it. The first few times a couple of years ago when I got some attacks from some trans activists on this, and they were trying to obviously get me cancelled. I mean, I just come out fighting. I never understand why people don't just frankly put two fingers up to these people. And they seem to have decided I'm not worth bothering with, which is welcome. But they've gone for JK Rowling. And the interesting thing is, she has been uncancelable, as we've seen. And she actually tweeted yesterday, to be fair, when you can't get a woman sacked, arrested or dropped by her publisher, and cancelling her only makes her book sales go up, there's really only one place to go. And this was after someone, a Twitter user called Sam, who described themselves as a gender fluid lesbian and a cyber Marxist, wrote to JK Rowling saying, I wish you a very nice pipe bomb in mailbox. Very unpleasant. She kind of mocked this. She seems to have been able to stand by her guns. Of course, she's someone who's able to, have security if she needs it and to protect herself. And she has proved herself to be uncancelable. What do you put this anger down to, and the reaction to it? Because it seems to me that there are very few people who are standing up for JK Rowling throughout all of this. Whereas when there's abuse from a very small number of people, it would transpire, of Marcus Rashford and Saka and others for missing penalties in the Euro final. I think that abuse is totally unacceptable, absolutely disgusting and unacceptable. And those people needed to be hounded from social media, absolutely. However, there was an outcry, national media, front page news. I was watching it from afar on holiday. It was leading news broadcast constantly for days on end. And yet when someone threatens to rape, murder and abuse a woman for speaking out on this issue, barely a whimper. Why?
It really is quite obscene. I noted the same thing. The racist abuse of Saka and Sancho and Rashford. The vast majority of people in this country recognise that was repulsive and disgusting. Thankfully, it was from a very small number of accounts, and some of them were from overseas. But as you say, that dominated the news for days on end, whereas the witch hunting and the hounding and the threatening of JK Rowling barely makes a ripple in the mainstream media. It's really shocking. There's a real double standard. And I think there's a strong element of cowardice in this. I think there are probably people, including in the liberal media, who recognise that this is bad, recognise that this is wrong, but are unwilling to speak out because they don't want to be called a TERF, or they don't want to be subjected to mob hatred, or they don't want to lose their pristine reputation as someone who has all the right views.
And they don't want to be called transphobic. I mean, that's the key thing, is that lots of the abuse that are directed at JK Rowling, my view is, even if she were transphobic, that still would not justify the threats and abuse she gets. But she's not transphobic. She has written extensively about her views on trans issues. She is very much supportive of trans rights and trans freedoms, and has never said or written anything that would ever suggest anything other than warmth, compassion and respect for trans people. And yet she's called a transphobe simply for believing what is biological fact. And I'm genuinely... If this is a hill I have to die on, if this is the reason I lose my job, I will keep saying this every single day on my show. Trans women are not women. Trans women are women. They are biological men. You cannot be born a man and become a woman. You cannot be a woman and become a man. You can change all your legal certificates, your birth certificates, your passport as much as you want. If you are born with a penis, you are not a woman and will never be a woman. Now, that is transphobic hatred, according to some. I believe that is a statement of biological fact.
Yeah, and what's happened, that's exactly right. What has happened is that biological fact has been redefined as bigotry. And so what you have, JK Rowling, like me and you, she believes that trans people deserve to live a full life, free from persecution, free from discrimination, free from harassment. I have never met anyone who doesn't agree with that. But the question is, what happens when the transgender lobby, which is a very different thing altogether, when that starts to harass women and demonize women and shut people down for expressing biological scientific truths? And I think it's unavoidable now that, in my view, the transgender lobby is like misogyny in drag, because it presents itself as a progressive force. It wears this progressive garb. It thinks it's the new civil rights movement, but in fact it is often disgustingly misogynistic towards women who hold certain views on sex and gender. That's what the JK Rowling stuff shows. It shows that freedom of speech is under assault these days, freedom of conscience is under assault, and the right of women in particular to express views on sex and gender, that is no longer tolerated by the supposedly woke set.
Yeah. And again, no one is talking about trying to stop trans people from living a free and happy life in the identity they want to live in. On the contrary, but it is about protecting women from, and again, I don't even think it's actually from genuine trans people. It's from predatory men, and we know, huge numbers of men in prison right now who are convicted of sex offences against women are now self-declaring themselves as women and trying to get themselves transferred to women's prisons, and often successfully. And we have cases where women prisoners have been sexually assaulted by men purporting to be women, to be trans women. I mean, there is clearly a risk to women and girls in changing rooms, in prisons, in refuges, in many other safe spaces, women's toilets, where, I'm sorry, men and women don't want to be in the same toilets. They don't want to be in the same changing rooms. I've never met a man or woman who do want to do that, other than these people purporting to be acting for trans rights, who I don't think represent anyone other than, and then frankly, men who wish women ill.
Call me old-fashioned, but I don't want a naked man, someone with a male body, walking around in a changing rooms where there are 7-year-old girls.
Thank you.
Or women.
Call us old-fashioned, Brendan. Call us old-fashioned.
We don't want that to happen. And then, of course, there are even more serious situations like domestic violence shelters, which are for women. They don't want male people in there either, and also women's prisons. This is, I think what's very clearly happened is that the transgender lobby is now undermining rights that women campaigned for a very long time. And that is why people like JK Rowling, Maya Forstater and others, and you, Julia, that's why you are raising this issue, pushing back, not because you wish ill upon trans people, absolutely quite not. The opposite, because we're interested in defending scientific truth, women's rights, and freedom of speech to discuss all these issues openly.
Absolutely. I'm going to say, I'm never, ever going to shut up about this. This is Orwellian stuff. I will never pretend to believe something I know not to be true.